Hey everybody, it's May 12th, and this is my second video following the Baseball Legends Facebook page at Baseball Legends Series on Facebook. And every day, like I said yesterday, they do a new post, so we're going to get into that. But I want to start today with something even more important than whatever is posted here. But it's the state of baseball and what is happening with the players' union and the owners and what I think is going to happen. And if you are a fan of baseball, like obviously I am and everybody following this page, it's time to start worrying. And honestly, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see baseball coming back this year. Now, can they come back? 100%. But what happened here was the owners agreed to a situation where they said we want to do revenue sharing 50-50 with the players, and that's how we're going to play this season. It was going to be 82 games, DH in both leagues, all the rules. Throw that aside for a second. That doesn't matter. The only thing that's important is basically 82 games, then a playoffs, and revenue sharing. Now, on a given year, revenue sharing between the teams and the owners is something that would highly benefit the players. In this situation, it is a complete disaster, and it is not going to be accepted by the players' union under any circumstance. Now, why is that? Okay, what is revenue sharing? Basically, the amount of money that's coming in, it's going to be split down the middle. Half goes to the players, half goes to the owners. Then that money is going to be distributed wherever. So, problem A, how are the teams individually with the players going to decide how to split up the money when there's guys who already have contracts, every single guy basically, and some of them are getting paid a tremendous amount of money. Other guys are getting paid basically nothing. Like, I understand there's going to be a percentage of money, but what if there's not enough revenue brought in to hit the guys who have the big contracts numbers? So for those guys, the veterans, the Mike Trouts, the Garrett Coles, the guys who have already cashed in, Anthony Rendon, I don't see how they could even remotely think about signing off on this. Whereas guys who are on their second year, like a Pete Alonso, whose salary is $725,000 or whatever it is before arbitration, it's going to benefit him greatly. He might make 5 times the amount of money than he's making, but that also means Mike Trout, or in that case, Jacob deGrom, might make 5 times less money. So that's an issue. The other issue is all these guys, like I said, have contracts. The average revenue that's brought in for a major league team yearly is about $330 million. A lot of money. The Yankees brought in, for instance, $683 million, where the Tampa Bay Devil Rays brought in far less than that. So it all basically adds up to $330 million. So let's use that as a number. Okay, so split that in half. Half goes to the owners, half going to the players. Okay? So now you're at a number that is basically a higher end team payroll. Okay? So $165 million, that's like the Mets payroll. It's a little bit less than obviously the Dodgers and the Red Sox typically and the Yankees, but it's a high payroll. So you can obviously spread that money out pretty fairly for most teams because, again, a team like the Marlins with a $20 million payroll, that's a lot more money than they normally have. The issue, though, is that $330 million is over the course of your average year, which means 162 games, okay? It means fans in the stadium, parking, all that stuff. So now that's gone pretty much because even if they do play, there's not going to be fans, or there's not going to be as many fans. There's half the games to begin with, and 330, let's just say for argument's sake, 165 million is what they're splitting up now, because they're only going to be making half, and that's conservative. I mean, they might make revenue-wise maybe $100 million on average per team. You know, and that means 50 million is getting split up, you know, to both sides. So even if you use those big numbers, look at a team like the Angels. Mike Trout, it makes 33 million a year. Rendon just signed. He's at 35 million. Pujols, who's been signed for a long time now, is at 24 million this year. Just between those three guys, you add up their salaries, what if you cut it in half and prorated it, you're at pretty much the number of the entire revenue that might be brought in. And you still got 40 other guys. And that brings up the other question is, well, when guys get hurt and a guy comes up for a week, what's his pay? Like, it just doesn't add up, because you're hurting your best players. Yes, you're benefiting the lower end players, but there is no way in hell that a guy making $35 million is going to accept $3 million when he's under contract. So the owners are power playing this and saying, look, we're losing money anyway. At this point, by restarting the season, we're only going to lose more money. It's not benefiting us, guys. So if you want to get anything, you need to back down and you need to accept it. That is horrible precedent to set, okay? I don't agree with the owners in this case. Normally on labor negotiations, I could go either way, but the owners are dead wrong here because of the global situation we're in. People need baseball, and they need sports, and they need something positive. And the last thing that baseball needs, after its history with this type of stuff, is to shut down the entire season because the owners are worried about losing more money than they would have. Instead of just taking it on the chin, dealing with it, and then hopefully the fans will continue to support you like they normally do next year, or whatever, things get back to normal, and you could start up again. But this is going to leave a very bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and I get where the owners are coming from. I mean, they're businessmen. You don't get to own a team if you're not, business-minded. So they're looking like, hey, we already lost X amount. If we start baseball back up and play games, the only benefit would be that the players are at least getting some money and the fans are getting, something to do. For us, though, it's a negative. The players are saying, look, we have contracts. Why would we agree to this? Half of Mike Trout's salary is a lot more money than he would be getting playing 81 games, revenue sharing, and with what they bring in, which could be $5 million. I mean, he might be losing $12 million. I mean, we're not talking small amounts of money. So I just think it's way too complicated, and I don't think the players can accept it, even if they're like, look, let's just do it, because baseball players only have a finite amount of earning time. I mean, what's the average player play? Let's say 6 years. A great player is going to get 12 to 15, but that's it. They got 1 or 2 contracts to make it right. You're going to take an entire year out potentially, or $15 million away from somebody. That's not right. The owners should just pay prorated. I think everyone would agree to that. Look, we're paying half, or even if you want to be in the ballpark and negotiate a little bit, but you can't have revenue sharing now when no other time would you even consider it as the owners to revenue share, especially when the Yankees are bringing $683 million. Okay? Do you want to revenue share as the owners, the Steinbrenners, with your team and then have to, dish out the money back to baseball? Because the players will get paid more money than they normally get paid. Because everybody's basically, in this case, the salary cap would be $165 million. That's what would be for the players. If you do a normal year, $333 million of revenue split into 2. So that's a huge jump for a lot of teams, more money to spend, because there's only maybe 4 or 5 teams that even get close to $165 million right now. So the owners would never do that, but now they want to do it. It's just not a good look, and people are going to realize, and the players aren't going to accept it. And I see this going to the Supreme Court, quite honestly, because I don't know how this is justified. The contract is just getting like thrown out, like, okay, the contract doesn't count. I know you're owed this, but sorry. The fact that they can play is the issue. So maybe they can't play the second, but they're going to be able to play. I'm pretty sure in these guys' contracts, there's no clause saying you're going to get paid half of what you normally get paid because there's no fans, or we're playing less games or something unless there's a strike, or like I don't know the logistics of each guy's contract, but I'm guaranteed there's nothing about the fans showing up and how much money the owners make determines their pay. They're guaranteed an amount of money. That's it. So watch that situation, but I don't see it heading in a great direction. Anyway, back to some fun stuff. So Baseball Legends, May 12th. Let's see what we're talking about today. Okay. There's the first video. If you don't watch that, go ahead. That was about baseball players in the media. Okay. Since the days of Babe Ruth, fans of baseball have been drawn to long home runs. Even though a ball that just clears the wall scores the same number of runs as a 500-foot blast, there's a certain thrill that goes through the crowd when a ball is hit extra far. On this date in baseball history, some of the players who hit the ball furthest had big games. I already like this because when I played, I was all or nothing. I would rather hit a home run than hit a double, quite honestly. So obviously, it didn't go very well most times, but those few times when it did, nothing was better. So, first, 1958, you have Willie Mays, had a great day with 2 home runs against the rival Dodgers. His second home run of the game was a grand slam in the 5th inning, marking the first grand slam for the Giants franchise as a representative of their new city of San Francisco. So, obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, they were the New York Giants, and they played, the Polo Grounds? I think that's right. I might be mixing up places, but anyway, then they moved out to San Francisco, and obviously they are now the San Francisco Giants as of today as well. So another long ball hitter of that era, Ernie Banks, launched his 500th career home run on this date in 1970. Again, 500 home runs, that's elite company. Elite. Ernie Banks was a great player. Next, in 1998, Mark Grace, Cubs lefty first baseman, hit a fly ball into right center field at Bank One Ballpark in Arizona. The ball would be the first home run ball to land in the pool. So they have a unique feature there, obviously with the pool in right field. Nice ballpark, always been a hitter's park. They started playing around with how they kept the balls and stuff, similar a little bit to Coors, so sort of little regression in stats there, but normally Arizona, definitely a top 5 ballpark for hitters. But anyway, so 2 years later, Grace would join the Diamondbacks where he would spend 3 seasons. However, he would not hit another ball into the pool in those 3 years. Grace became a fan favorite in Arizona during the team's World Series run in 2001, and on this date in 2001, a slugger across the border had a milestone homer. Carlos Delgado of the Blue Jays hit his 204th home run in Blue Jays uniform, surpassing Joe Carter. We all remember his home run in World Series for the most in franchise history. That is interesting. Carlos Delgado was one of the best players nobody talks about now. Blue Jays, he was a monster, and then he came over the Mets. That was an unbelievable lineup with Beltran, Wright, Reyes, Delgado, Cliff Floyd, Paulo Duca. I mean, that was a stacked lineup. And Carlos Delgado's a monster right in the middle of it. Like, prototypical cleanup hitter. Really just a great player that, nobody's going to remember because he's not enough numbers for the Hall of Fame. He was one-dimensional, but great hitter. And lastly, in 2015, Giancarlo Stanton hit one of the longest home runs in Dodger Stadium's 53 years when he went deep off Mike Bolzinger. The ball completely left the ballpark, making Stanton one of just 4 players to hit one out of the stadium. The other players to accomplish this feat were sluggers Mike Piazza, McGuire, Willie Stargell did it twice, and Basically, the question of today is, what player impressed you the most by how hard they've hit the ball? So I'm going to go through some comments here. I'm going to think about what I'm going to pick, but I got already a couple in mind. So let's start at the bottom here. Okay. We have Cecil Fielder and Frank Howard. Cecil Fielder, I think younger people are more familiar with Prince Fielder, his son, Brewers, who unfortunately had a neck issue and had to end his career prematurely. But Prince hit 50 home runs in a season. Cecil, I think his high was around 44. Might be wrong. But he definitely had monster power as well, the old man. And he hit plenty of balls on top of that old Tiger Stadium roof, which was, again, an impressive shot. Big guy, and just he could mash. And then Frank Howard, speaking of big guys, Frank Howard is probably the biggest baseball player to ever play. I mean, he was a monster. I think he was at least 6'7", 6'6", maybe he was bigger, 6'8", somewhere in that range. But he was thick. I mean, if he weighed 300 pounds, it wouldn't shock me. I don't know exactly what he was listed at, when he was playing. But he was a large man, and he hit the ball very hard. And quite honestly, when you think of intimidating baseball players, Frank Howard's probably at the top of the list. And he's also a great player, on top of that. So it wasn't just kind of this big guy who you throw up in the box and can't really do much. He was an amazing player. Next, you got Richie Allen. Again, Richie Allen was another big man and great player. He was in the 60s. Lots of power. Somebody that, again, not many people really probably know that much about. But he's just a name that when you hear it and you go look up his numbers and you're like, wait a minute, this guy was a great, great player. And the shame about Richie Allen is he's not in the Hall of Fame. And I don't know what year, but around like 2010 maybe, they started a new committee for Hall of Fame voting. I think it was called the Golden Era Committee or something. And Richie Allen was on the ballot, and he came one vote short. And basically, then they did it again, and he came like another vote short. So he's right on the cusp. I think they vote again in 2020. So I don't even know how their ballot works, but Richie Allen should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Now, one of the most famous guys, obviously, when it comes to this stuff, is Mickey Mantle. So there's some legend and there's some reality. So we'll start with the legend because it's literally insane to me that this possibly happened. So they said Mickey Mantle hit a ball about 683 feet, I want to say. Something like that. Let's just say 650 plus feet when he was at USC. Now, there's no recording of this, there's no video, there's no like, hey, that definitely happened. But it's kind of like folklore, almost similar somewhat to Babe Ruth's, called shot, where, yeah, it kind of was like that, but not really, one of those things. So, yeah, he probably hit a monster home run there. Did it go 690 feet? Probably not. But he did hit one at Yankee Stadium that went easily, mid-fives. And the problem with the home run stuff, like the numbers, is it's very hard to actually gauge how far it went because, if it hits something or just tracking it or if it goes out of the stadium, it's just not an easy thing to really have a good number of how far it actually went. Now they could do it much better, and it's pretty accurate, but I'm sure down the road we'll find out that was a little bit off. So Mickey Mantle, a monster power switch hitter. I mean, what more can you say? Next here, some other Yankees. So Sanchez has a very fast bat. I'll agree with you there. A lot of power for a catcher. Judge, unfortunately, is so injury prone that it's almost hard to talk about him at this point because you're just not sure what he is. I mean, when he's healthy and he's playing, he is one of the most talented baseball players you ever see in your life. Another massive man. I mean, he's 6'8". I think he is the tallest position player to ever play. Could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure there's a couple pitchers bigger, like Chris Young and Randy Johnson. But Judge, I think, is the tallest position player officially. But he's a massive talent, and he's been on record with exit velocity, which they started tracking with StatCast, and he's had one of the highest ever exit velocities. So the sky's the limit for him. And yeah, I mean, both of those guys hit the ball. Judge especially lights it up. But for the both of them, it's like Gary Sanchez is probably the most polarizing player in, Yankees land at this point. Some people love him, some people hate him. But Judge is just like, what is he? I hope he could stay healthy because we know he's talented, but it's just, can you stay on the field at that size, which is an interesting kind of conundrum for the Yankees in baseball. Okay, I see Dave Winfield. All right. Dave Winfield is one of the greatest athletes who have ever stepped foot on any field or court. This guy got drafted by all three major sports. I think there's only 6 other people that have ever had the chance to say that. And basketball, he went to the University of Minnesota, got drafted by the Atlanta Hawks and the ABA. So technically, he got drafted 4 times because the ABA and the NBA back then were obviously 2 separate leagues. He got drafted by the ABA and the Atlanta Hawks. He got drafted, obviously, in baseball. The crazy thing, though, is he got drafted in baseball as a pitcher, number 4 overall. And then even though he didn't even play football, he got drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. Back then, it's not like it was today. With 7 rounds, the NFL draft had 17 to, I don't even know, maybe. He got drafted in the 17th round. They might have had 25 rounds. I don't know the exact number, but he got drafted in the 17th round. So they took a flyer on a guy who never played football, but that's how good of an athlete he was. 6'6", could run, could throw, could hit. Now, Winfield, as this gentleman says, Gary Davis, basically talking about when he was young with the Padres, that's who drafted him. He didn't hit a ton of homers, but he's positive his exit velocity must have been real. I agree. I mean, just the athletic ability and the control of one's body to be able to play all of those sports at an elite level at the same time, and then get drafted by a sport that didn't even have any game footage of it. You never played. I mean, he can obviously hit a baseball very hard just because, again, power is one thing. Body control, torque, and all that stuff is what really brings the bat speed and the exit velocity. So I could definitely see that. That's an interesting pick because, again, Winfield, yeah, he didn't. I don't know his tops in homers, but I don't think he ever hit more than 40 in a year, and I think most years he was in the 20s. Okay. Dave Kingman. Now, Dave Kingman is another monstrous man. Dave Kingman, when he retired, was like top 5 in most strikeouts ever. So Dave Kingman was how I played. All or nothing. He had what you would call light tower power. Okay? He would hit the ball 5,000 feet in the air and 600 feet away. So he just hit majestic home runs, this guy, and that's what he did. He had 442 for his career. He played for a bunch of teams. He played for a long time. He never hit for a high average. He struck out or hit a home run, and that's what he was. And that's why he's not in the Hall of Fame, even though he's a guy that most baseball fans are very familiar with. But he's just not a complete player, and he's a kind of a unique player. And there's a couple other guys, like Adam Dunn, kind of as a lefty, reminds me of him a little bit, where it's just all or nothing. They're big, they're strong, they get a hold of it, goodbye. So they're talking about a home run that he hit at Wrigley, which was 3 houses down. Wrigley, I remember that home run derby with McGuire and those guys when they were all juiced up, and they were hitting the ball out onto the street. And that's just a cool scene because that's a place where you can actually see where the ball's landing, and nothing's really there to hit it. So that's amazing. And they say, let me see what else they say here. Is there a video of the homer he's talking about? So yes, there is. So I would like to see that video. I'll probably look it up later. I'm interested in that. I love watching home run videos. And who do we got here? Darryl Strawberry. So Roger was in the bleachers at the old stadium, which I guess he's talking about Yankee Stadium, or it could be Shea, either or. And he had such a towering monster shot that I thought it would hurt somebody who had an native glove. I think that sometimes too. Like, I've never had a ball near me in the stands ever to even attempt this, but catching the ball with your hand at any point, that can't feel very good. But Darryl Strawberry is one of those stories of as much talent as you could physically put in somebody, had his demons, let them get out of control, but then redeemed himself. So I talked about Albert Bell yesterday. Albert Bell never kind of got it together at any point up until even today, where Darryl Strawberry's been sober for a long time. Doc Gooden, unfortunately, they got sober together. Both of them, obviously, with the Yankees. Gooden threw the no-hitter with them. Strawberry with the World Series. Played a big role on that team. Doc has drifted from time to time. Darryl has stayed very consistent and has really turned his life around. You know, forget about baseball success and that. I mean, just as a person, I mean, he really has changed tremendously from where he was when his problems started, which was basically right after, it was probably during the 86 Mets. He got drafted, I think, in 84. He's the number one pick, and he was probably off to the races right away. But by like 1990, when he went to the Dodgers, it was just out of control. And obviously, most of us know the story from there. Okay, Jose Canseco. So again, the steroid guys, Jose Canseco's Mr. Steroid. He had massive power. Obviously, he was on steroids, which helped, but he's also a very big guy in general, and then he had the steroids. When he would connect, he would connect. So, obviously, steroids notwithstanding. Again, this post isn't about steroids. I mean, this is the one post where steroids are kind of encouraged, like, who hit the ball the hardest and furthest? Most likely steroid guys. You know, they had a little advantage in that area when it comes to strength, but the home run in the upper deck at the Sky Dome versus Toronto in the ALCS looked like it hadn't started coming down. Yeah, I mean, him and McGuire hit some massive shots, and McGuire is one guy who came right to my mind when the page asked, you know, who do you think hit the ball the hardest? And McGuire and Canseco, those A's teams, they were real Bash brothers. So, and then the author agrees. Hardest shots, you know, basically I've ever seen. I'm not familiar with them, that one offhand, but I'll go look at that. And Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera, who, funny enough, I was mentioning before with the Angel thing, and both hit it hard and smooth. That is, you know, when you talk about just great hitters, so some of these guys on the list, like Kingman and Canseco and, you know, a few other guys were sluggers. Pujols and Cabrera are two of the greatest hitters of all time. Not of this generation, of all time. I mean, Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown. Look at Miguel Cabrera's numbers. I mean, he's unbelievably talented. And the crazy thing about Miguel Cabrera is who knows how much better he could have been if he had his shit together the entire time. He is a guy who had drinking problems and was really pretty much by his teammates' accounts out of hand for a long time, especially with the Marlins. And he wasn't putting in the work, but he was just so gifted that it didn't really make a difference. And then when he got over to the Tigers, he cleaned up, and we saw what he did. But at that point, and even now, you know, he's a little bit older. But who knows if he would have, from day one, been focused like he is or was when he got to the Tigers and that situation. So he's just unbelievable. One of the things that stick out in my mind about him is when he hit the intentional walk into right field to drive the run home. I think that won the game, actually. That was just like, you know you're talented when you attempt that in a major league game. Because if that doesn't work, you're forever famous for the wrong reason. And Pujols, again, a good debate would be who had a better run, Pujols or Cabrera, because they're very similar hitters. High average. I mean, you're talking 330, 340 a year. Huge power. Great discipline at the plate. Just what more can you want from a right-handed hitter? So, good pick there, Tim. All right. Roberto Clemente, you know, what more can you say about Roberto Clemente other than he's one of the greatest baseball players that ever lived? And obviously what happened with the plane crash and ending his life, helping out Puerto Rico, is one of the saddest things you could think of. You know, Thurman Munson and other things like that. But Clemente, unbelievable arm, unbelievable batter, unbelievable just person, all right? I never saw Roberto Clemente play, but from everything I've read and seen, he was a right fielder. If you were going to mold it out of clay of what you want, arm and game, that's what it would look like, even today's standards. So, really legendary player there. And I wish I would have got to see him. And I wish there was more video of some of the older guys. And obviously his outfield arm is legendary, of course, as well. I was waiting for this one because this is a very famous one. Reggie Jackson, I mean, yeah, he's talking about the All-Star game in Detroit. And basically, it was off Doc Ellis, who, if you remember, pitched a no-hitter on LSD. But he was pitching. And the crazy thing about that game was Jackson wasn't even supposed to play. He was dealing with an injury, and then somebody else was dealing with an injury. So he was available when he wasn't supposed to be, and then they needed a pinch hitter. And here comes Reggie Jackson. So basically, rumor was, or legend is, he wasn't going to be running if that ball, you know, was a grounder to second base. If that ball was a double, he wasn't going to run. Now, back then, which was, I think this was 71. Oh, does he say? I think it was 71. The All-Star games meant something. They're playing for pride. Like, if that was today and you saw a guy who was kind of hurt, and number one, he wouldn't even get in the box. But number two, even if he did and he couldn't run, he would have stayed there, and that would be the end of it. And nobody would really care as much as they want to hype up the All-Star game nowadays. But then it mattered to people. So the fact that he wasn't going to run made this even more impressive, because not only did he hit a home run, he had basically the farthest ball that most people have ever seen. And apparently it went 370 feet past the fence. And the only thing that really stopped it, and again, what I mentioned earlier is it's hard to judge some of these things, was it hit basically a light tower out there. Otherwise, who knows where it would have landed? And 600 feet, what the actual distance was doesn't matter, but the fact of the matter is that the guy, forget Kirk Gibson, the mammoth shot with basically the idea that either it's going over the fence or it's an out because I'm not moving is even more amazing to me in this situation. And obviously Kirk Gibson was much more important, his home run, and more iconic, but we're talking about power here. So when you're talking about power, to be on one leg or whatever was wrong with him, unbelievable. So Reggie, good pick there. Probably would have been, if you asked me to pick in 2 seconds, he would have been my pick. So there's some of the comments. If I didn't get to any comments or I'm missing something, I know this gets posted around a lot. I will try and get you next time, but who have I seen hit the hardest? I have a couple things in mind. I'm going to actually show you one, so I'll pull that up here. I'll show you two of them because they're just amazing. We'll end with that. But Here's a few, and then I'll show you these two. Number one, Mo Vaughn. I'm a Mets fan. Mo Vaughn, who sucked with the Mets, obviously had a great years with the Red Sox, and then he came to the Mets, and everyone was excited, and he was awful. But he hit a ball at Old Shea that was crushed. I think it was his only home run in a Met uniform. I could be wrong there, but seemed like it. And it went basically almost halfway to a little more than halfway up that big scoreboard in Shea Stadium. So if you remember Shea, they had the giant scoreboard in right center field. And it was just like, wow. Like, where was this the entire time you've been here? And that was it from there. So that was like the one moment. Another one, speaking of Shea, which I've never seen a highlight of this. I was watching it. I don't know what year it was, but it was McGuire, Cardinals. He hit a ball opposite field, and this was before Mo Vaughn, so it's kind of hard for me to mentally judge which one was kind of higher up. But he hit it opposite field off basically the middle to upper of the scoreboard. That was absurd. Now, one that I'm going to show you is McGuire, and then another one is Barry Bonds. Now, Barry Bonds has plenty, but there's two that stick out. I'll show you one, but the one I won't show you is Yankee Stadium. He pulls the ball up into the old Yankee Stadium. It's just unbelievable. The speed and the power and just the precision of his swing. So again, forget about steroids for a day if that offends you. Just enjoy the mammoth power of these guys. So here's the first one I'm going to show you. The Mark McGuire, Randy Johnson home run at the old Kingdom, okay? So, there it is. Let me get this rolling.
No, now all right, the 3-2 pitch to McGuire. Swing and a high fly ball belted. And I mean belted deep to left field into the upper deck. My, oh my, what a shot by McGuire. That is probably the longest home run ever hit here. I mean, it almost got to the back wall.
Yeah. I mean, I think the announcer pretty much sums it up for there, but that is unbelievable. Now, this one I'm going to set up for you a little bit here. So this was the World Series. This is potentially for the Angels, their deciding game. If you watch to remember, you know what happens. But this is with 2 outs in the 9th inning. Troy Percival, 2-run lead, is trying to save the World Series. Okay? He just got Jeff Kent out. One more batter to go. Barry Bonds is coming up. It's a 1-0 count at this point. And again, I want you to just remember when you see what happens here that the World Series is in the line. The nerves to close the game for the team, everybody. And I just want you to notice what goes on here. If you've never seen this, it's unbelievable on a lot of levels. Okay. All right. So the fact that Tim Salmon, they're trying to win a World Series. Now it's a 1-run lead. Like, you'd think everyone would be nervous on an edge. And he was so awestruck by what he just saw physically that he said, this is the farthest ball I've ever seen hit. That reaction from a Major League veteran who is trying to win the World Series and is 1 out away, but also now only 1-run lead, that is unbelievable to me. That always sticks out in my mind. Like, that was his reaction. Not like, oh my God, like, we're going to... It was like, wow. And that's what tells me. And first of all, I have no idea where that ball landed. That could have went 700 feet away. I think it went out of the stadium. I don't know. You can watch it for yourself, but I've watched that clip 1,000 times. I still cannot track where the ball actually landed. and you don't see any fans like moving about. So I think the ball went out of the stadium, which I've never seen before at that where the Angels played. But Bonds was a freak of nature, and obviously, steroids aside, one of, if not the most talented pound-for-pound player to ever play baseball. And I talked about him yesterday as well. And again, I wasn't a Giants fan, wasn't a Barry Bonds fan. I actually hated Barry Bonds, quite honestly, during the years. I remember when he hit a home run off Billy Wagner that almost hit him in the face, and he pulled it. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, that is not real. So, the steroid years were absurd, but the talent he possessed, you can't deny. And then you combine that with a little bit of help and a lot of strength and a larger head, you end up with things like that. So, hope you enjoyed that. And we will talk tomorrow about whatever topic they bring up. And I'll also keep you updated if you're not paying attention yourself.